run. Great Magician, dramatic stretch run. Here's the wire, spun to run, fought on.
Here's War of Will, and he got to an opening on the inside of the gate pole, but nothing stood in his way. War of Will won the Preakness.
Improbable clear by 3. They will not get to Improbable. Improbable and Drayton Van Dyke take the Shared Belief Stakes.
But Mr. Money has picked clear, running down to the furlong pole, and Mr. Money is 5 in front. Mr. Money adding the West Virginia Derby to his burgeoning resume.
Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report, and welcome to the show. This is the Pennsylvania Derby Preview and Pick Podcast, and as we all know, the field of 7 got reduced by 1 with the defection of Maximum Security. His tubes got all tied up in the lead up to this grade $1 million 9 furlong event. Had a bout of colic, and of course that put him not only out of this race, but probably it's going to put him out of commission for 2019. Meantime, it leaves the field of 6, and let's quickly get into the 6-horse field for the Pennsylvania Derby for these 3-year-old males on the dirt. Number 1 is Math Wizard. He's at 6-1 with the revised odds via the defection of Maximum Security. He's at 6-1 in 12 career starts. He has 2 wins, 2 seconds, and 3 thirds. 6th in the West Virginia Derby behind one of the contenders in this race, Mr. Money. He was 2nd in the Indiana, Ohio Derbies to Mr. Money and Owendale, respectively. He's a kind of a stalker, and he'll show some speed in here in a short field coming out of the number 1. He's going to have to be sent. Math Wizard at 6-1. Number 2 is, of course, the Bob Baffert train, Improbable. We all know all the hype that surrounded him after he won the Los Al Futurity as a 2-year-old. Got delayed along with Stablemate Game Winner in debuting as a 3-year-old. Ran a nice race, even though he was upset by Long Range Toddy and the Rebel in the split divisions of that. Then ran 2nd to the emerging Omaha Beach, the emerging star that was Omaha Beach in the Arkansas Derby. And then, of course, in the Kentucky Derby, he ran 6th, was moved up to 5th, was the favorite in the Preakness, and he finished 6th there. Disappointed a lot of people. Took a break, won the Share Belief Stakes at a flat mile in a short field at Del Mar. Was impressive. Posted a 104 Beyer speed figure. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Mike Smith will replace Drayton Van Dyke again. This horse has had a number of jockeys. We'll dive into that as well. In 8 career starts, he has 4 wins with 2 seconds and 1 fourth. Mike Smith again will be aboard for number 2, Improbable. He's going to be at revised odds of 8-5, more than likely going to be the post-time favorite coming out of the number 2 slot. Number 3 is Shanghai Superfly. He's a maiden in 8 starts, 3 second place finishes. He's at 30-1, and he probably is going to be at 50-60, possibly almost 100-1 once we get into the real deal Holyfield post-time lead up to the Pennsylvania Derby. Nothing really much to say about him at 30-1 and what will be inflated odds as I said before, in the lead up to this Pennsylvania Derby. Number 4 is one of the favorites, War of Will. He disappointed in the Jim Dandy. He had things his way on the front end, got a reasonable pace and faded and completely emptied out, finishing 5th there after a 9th place finish in the Belmont Stakes. He won the Preakness after having the trouble and being impeded by Maximum Security in the Kentucky Derby, where he finished 7th. We know what happened in the Louisiana Derby. He had the hind end issues, where he finished 9th after being the favorite off his 2 graded stakes wins at that same fairgrounds venue in the Lecomte and the Risen Star. He's been inconsistent, but he's also shown flashes of brilliance. He comes in at 4-1 in 12 lifetime starts. He's got 4 wins, 1 second, and 1 third. For trainer Mark Casse, Tyler Gaffalione gets the mount. War of Will at 4-1 coming out of post number 4 for Mark Casse. Number 5 is Spun to Run. He's improving. He was a distant third though in the Red Hot Haskell Invitational, where of course which featured Mucho Maximum. If you saw in my podcast around that race between Maximum Security and Mucho Gusto, a fantastic run by those 2 horses. He was 8 lengths back in third. He then rebounded and came back to Parks in the local prep at a track we all know he likes, the home of the Pennsylvania Derby, winning the Smarty Jones Stakes Grade 3, beating a very nice horse in Gray Magician, who looked like he was going to blow right by him in the stretch. Very impressive to re-rally and win that race. In 8 lifetime starts, he's been very consistent. 3 wins, 1 second, 3 thirds. yards. And of course, Paco Lopez will be aboard. He's a son of Hard Spun, one of the superstars of the 2000 class of 2007. 3-year-olds that included Curlin and Street Sense and Rags to Riches and so forth. And so he's a son of that great stallion. And he comes in at 8-1. Juan Guerrero is the trainer. He's a horse that's going to get some play. Again, I think he may be a little outclassed here, but we'll, elaborate on that here in a minute. Mr. Money is coming out of number 6. He's the now horse. He's the hot horse. He's won 4 graded stakes in a row, and even though they haven't been at the G1 level, he blew out a good field in the Pat Day Mile. He was impressive, coming back to Churchill in the Matt win. He was, of course, workmanlike after dealing with a loose horse in the Indiana Derby, and then, of course, he blew the doors off the competition in the West Virginia Derby at Mountaineer. He won that race by 6 lengths after winning the Indiana Derby by about 2.5, almost 3. He won the Matt win by 6-7 lengths, so he's been very impressive for trainer Brett Calhoun, who basically, after the disappointments down at the fairgrounds, which included their signature event, the Louisiana Derby, he was able to shorten this horse up, and now he's stretched him back out. He's been very, very impressive. You got to give him credit in here. He is going to be 2-1, but I get the feeling there's a sense he probably will be the post-time favorite. He's certainly going to be one of the top 2 choices. Gabriel Saez gets the mount for trainer Brett Calhoun. Mr. Money in 10 career starts. He has 5 wins in 2 seconds. Again, at 2-1 odds, there's a good chance he will be the favorite, coming in off of 4 graded stakes. So let's take a look at the horses that we like in here and our picks for the Pennsylvania Derby from Parks Racing. Improbable. Visually, to me, the Share Belief Stakes at the Flat Mile was not an impressive run in my view, but he got a 104 Beyer speed figure. That's eye-popping at any distance for a 3-year-old, probably arguably the best one that we've seen of the sophomore class in 2019. Is this a precursor to an explosive run that everyone expected to see earlier in the year? Certainly Bob Baffert thinks so, and he's obviously, the public and certainly the morning line odds makers believe that the 8-5 favoritism is justified, that he will produce that. War of Will, he's an enigma. We just don't know which War of Will we're going to get. I kind of like him in here. I'm really not really enthralled with anybody in here, to be quite honest with you, even though Mr. Money has the 4 graded wins and upon being stretched out at 1 1/8, his winning time of 150.28. If it means anything else, one thing I've learned the hard way is that when you see these 150 type of times, granted, it could be argued he was eased, he was geared down and he's got a little something left, but again, at the end of the day, there's enough data to suggest when you see times like that in the 150, 151 range, you're dealing with a slower horse, and when they run against the real deal, Holyfield type of horses, there's going to be a problem, in Houston, somewhere along the line when these horses hit the turn. But he is in great form, and I would, certainly be remiss not to tell anybody viewing this podcast to not pick him. He could be a horse that has one more left in him, and who knows, maybe after this, Brett Calhoun and his connections will sit down and kick around the opportunity and the prospect of going to California to run, not maybe in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile or the Sprint, but the Breeders' Cup Classic. So that's what's on the line for Mr. Money, in addition to moving up the ladder in the 3-year-old division. He is a decent pick. I think War will get the trip, but I think this time Tyler Gaffleone is going to probably say, even if we can get the lead, we really don't want it unless we can cruise out there, and he wants to run opposite of the way, a polar opposite of the way he ran in the Jim Dandy. That's what you got to be hoping for with War Will. Otherwise, shooting at a target in a race that has some speed will probably serve him best. So even though you know how much I love Bob Baffert, improbable, again, this is a case point scenario where even with the 104, and as much as I'd love to pull the trigger and make him my final pick, in this particular scenario, I think I'm going to take a chance with War Will. Some would say that that's even more foolish than doubting Improbable's chances. But I like War Will in here. I think that Improbable probably will hit one of the top 2 spots. So if I had to pick, I probably would pick the 4, the 2, the 6, and then maybe the 5 spun to run. The 4, the 2, the 6, the 5. Those are my picks for the Pennsylvania Derby. Of course, I could change my mind. You might see a last-minute podcast pop up. But again, 6-horse field minus maximum security for the Pennsylvania Derby, and we'll do a nice little recap right here at the CS Racing Report.
Spun to run, fighting with Gray Magician. Spun to run, Gray Magician. Dramatic stretch run. Here's the wire. Spun to run, caught on. Improbable clear by 3. King Jack is running a game 1, closes the gap from second, but Improbable digs deep and finds more, and they will not get to Improbable. Improbable and Drayden Van Dyke take the shared belief stakes.
But Mr. Money has kicked clear. Mr. Money adding the West Virginia Derby to his burgeoning resume. Scores by 7 over Chess Chief.
But it's War of Will coming down to the 16th pole in front. In front by 2 lengths, but nothing stood in